Let's get this party started. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Wharton Spark Speaker Series. We have quite the lineup for you today. We have incredible speakers who have a depth of expertise in many different parts of AI. I'm just going to keep looking over here and admitting people as they come. My name is Lisa Neuberger Fernandez, and I am, of course, from Wharton, graduating class of 2000. And I'm going to ask our speakers to go around and introduce themselves, but this is not the typical introduction because these people have such an illustrious set of accomplishments that we could spend the entire hour just like going through and we wouldn't even get through like half of the panel. So what I'm going to ask you to do in kind of rapid fire is just share with us where your life and work, particularly your work, has intersected with AI in the last 5-10 years so that we understand your vantage point on AI. And I'm going to ask him to go first.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Kim Spalding. Great to see so many of you. I'm Wharton MBA class of 2000. Okay, so and I live here in San Francisco. And where has my life and work intersected with AI? Two places. So I recently sold my startup, which was a B2B tech provider for the food industry. And what was interesting about that work is obviously we built AI components for food distributors to use to automate things like ordering and e-commerce. But what turned out to be the hardest part was helping small and medium businesses implement pretty basic, simple AI and use it to help get to actually an ROI on that investment. So that actually was the hardest part, not actually building the tools or integrating with other ERPs or anything like that. So that was fascinating. And then the other place where I intersect with AI is since selling the startup, I've taken a job at Spencer Stewart. I do CEO advisory. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how the future changes in our workforce impact leaders and how leaders need to think differently.
Super interesting. Thank you, Kim. Next up, Marc.
Hi,
everyone. How do you intersect with AI?
Marc van Zadelhoff here, also class of 2000. I think there are a bunch of us on the phone here. Nice to see everybody. And I live in Boston and am dialing in from there today. And yeah, I'm running a company today called Mimecast, which is about 2,200 person cybersecurity company. I've been in cybersecurity ever since leaving Wharton, pretty much nonstop. Suppose the first intersection was I did spend a good amount of time at IBM in the many years since we graduated, 25 years. Quite a difficult effort, probably around 2016, to try and use Watson to actually do something in Joe Lichtenberger's area where he's taking in threat intelligence and making sense of it using AI and trying to correlate threat, what we call IOCs, indicators of compromise patterns for our customers. That was, first attempt at that, quite difficult, not always successful. And then, here at the company I'm at now, like I think a lot of people, we have sort of three efforts that we're focused on here. One is we kind of say AI in the pocket, in the product, and in the function is kind of, I guess, maybe the tagline. I have to credit my CFO for a little bit of that. Certainly in the pocket piece, and he's paying for that, which is we made sure every employee has some form of AI they can go to. We actually use a company called U.com, which I saw just did a round of funding. It's an aggregator. You can get any AI engine you want. It's quite cheap. And so we were able to get all 2,200 employees access, and that just ramped like crazy. You see the usage just spiral. So that's in the pocket, right? You just have it in your pocket. You can ask it a question. You can create little agents and the like. In the function is taking that to the next level, which is actually rolling out function-specific capability. Either it's embedded in a Zendesk for the customer support team or in Cursor if you're in the engineering team for coding. So a lot of that stuff ends up being a little bit more embedded. They still use the out-of-the-pocket stuff, but then bespoke ones per department. And then in the product is obviously we're a cybersecurity, maybe it's not obvious, Mimecast is a cybersecurity company with 40,000 customers around the world. We're trying to keep out hackers. And so using it in the product to improve our detection, our response, the productivity of usage of our product in all sorts of ways has been the third mantra. So in the pocket, in the function, in the product is kind of my current exposure and what we're spending time on.
Amazing. You said it was your CFO who named that?
He did the in the pocket one. Yeah, I think I get credit for the
Yeah.
other two, but the other two are just
He
pretty basic.
he's
So
good
yeah,
with words. I
good
like
words.
that.
Yeah,
It has a little jingle to it. In the pocket, in the product, in the function.
there you go. There you
Yeah.
go.
Awesome. Joanna, tell us where you're coming from an AI point of view, from
Hey
Hollywood.
everybody, Hollywood. I'm coming from Hollywood. It's great to see you all. Post Wharton, I went to McKinsey down in Miami, but after that, most of my career has been solidly in the media and tech space, particularly around innovation. So maybe they'll commute if they're not speaking, so we don't get the echoes in the background. I've worked at large media and tech organizations leading around innovation and new business lines at NBC Universal, at HP, at Singularity University, which is founded by Ray Kurzweil, who's one of the big leaders in AI, father of the Singularity. My most recent executive job was at CAA, where I was chief metaverse officer. That role was all around building out the AI strategy for Hollywood. This is prior to the strikes, and looking at how AI can be used both to protect talent, name, image, and likeness, and as well as set talent up for the future. So essentially, how do we scale talent? And since then, since I rolled out of there, I've been advising companies in the media and technology space around innovation, large production studios, early stage startups, particularly in AI, as well as executive producing a lot of content. So I've also executive produced content, and then sitting on a number of boards in the industry, helping to train the industry and anyone who creates content to understand how AI is impacting them today and will be impacting them in the future. So working with groups like Television Academy and the Producers Guild, where I also sit on the board.
Amazing. I just love that. It's a really different side than the first two speakers in terms of, the entertainment side of AI. Rocky, what's your vantage point on AI? I think it's a bit closer to Mark's.
Yeah, so it's good because I'm also working in cybersecurity, so it's interesting we've got two cyber folks here. But just background, I'm building my second company. My goal is to finally get Krishna to invest without making me move to Austin, but I have not been successful yet, so we'll see how that works. I may have to do another 2 or 3 companies.
He's all about Texas, Rocky. I don't think there's a way to get around that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm afraid I'll show up and he won't invest.
There's special exceptions for Wharton 2000, I heard.
We'll find out.
In Texas.
A couple of ways. A couple of ways that I maybe have something relevant to say here today. So in terms of, I've been around AI and crypto for actually most of the last 10 years. My last company was a fintech and had a bit of a crypto bent to it, or investors. But really kind of the most relevant thing I'm doing now around AI are probably 2 things. One is, given that we're early stage, we are actively trying to, leverage AI to replace or augment our humans. So we're building like AI agent SDRs with Agentforce right now through Salesforce, which is one of our investors, right? So we're really trying to be forward on the curve in terms of how aggressive can we be to leverage AI for sales, for coding, et cetera, and to mix success so far in terms of what it can actually do. And then in terms of the other angle is the company I'm building is around data security. And so we're thinking a lot and talking to customers a lot about how, humans or our data is still the product, right? So when you think about all those services we used to get back in .com 1.0, YouTube or Gmail, where basically they were all about giving us services to consume our data, right? To basically leverage and sell us things or figure things out. I view LLMs as having an insatiable appetite for all of our data. And not just at the personal or consumer level, but for every enterprise, every sales agreement, invoice, contract is now kind of incredibly important, or they want this at scale to ingest it, to leverage it, to figure out patterns, to then use it, right? So I think about all of an enterprise's data as being something that LLMs want. So how do you actually control access to your data in a world where your customers have integrated Copilot into their email clients? Or if you're using Trello, and Trello is integrated an AI agent, and that Trello happens to be the SaaS platform that one of your pen testers or someone uses, right? How do you control that? And so we're building a product, right? The first, I think the most interesting product that we've got coming to market is passwordless for files. So the ability to password protect any sort of document in a way that doesn't require passwords, so it makes it really seamless, but effectively prevent LLMs from ingesting that data. So you can take back control over what the LLMs can ingest and how they ingest, and eventually you build an agent to allow the LLM to ingest it, but in a much more controlled mechanism than happens today. And I think that's a topic that's people are starting to think about and talk about more now that they realize how much of their data is actually getting consumed by LLMs for training, for inference, for whatever they're doing with it.
Yeah, I used to think it was really odd that I would go to Google and it would tell me when my husband's flight was landing or something. But now there's so much more insightful things that my computer is telling me that I didn't know it would know. So I hear you. Krishna, round us out here. What's your vantage point on AI?
Got it. So I've been in the venture business since I left Wharton since Jan of 2000, and been investing in early stage technology companies here in Texas. So I started my own, founded Live Oak Ventures. We exclusively back tech companies with a center of gravity in Texas, not Rocky. That's and then of course we are multi-segment within that. So vantage point for me is around two dimensions. One is our companies. We've got about 50 active companies now. We invest in about 75 companies of the type where we have led the first rounds of investing here in Texas. So our 45 to 50 active companies, are they doing the right things here with respect to at least AI in the function using Marc's framework here, wherein that is really permeating across all the functional aspects of writing code to the sales side, the marketing side. There's plenty to use out there. So we've got a lot of peer-based learning mechanisms that happen so that we are able to learn from each other and use best-of-breed solutions and products for all elements from go-to-market, and especially the development side of the equation. How are we going to go about that? The other side of the coin is, how do we think about the investment landscape when we meet incredible number of companies and everyone comes in with an AI story. So how do we think about the investment landscape of companies and where there is distinctive long-term value to be built here? So let me, Lisa had asked me to maybe share a little bit more of our framework for how we think about classifying and categorizing companies. So let's try this visually or orally and see how that works. So we broadly think of companies falling into the kind of that AI infrastructure and management layer versus an AI applications layer, right? Infrastructure and management are like the building blocks or enablers to go build all of these applications. In the infrastructure, the bottomest layer of the infrastructure and management layer are the compute and foundational models, the models that all of us are familiar with, every consumer is, from OpenAI, GPT to Anthropic and Claude and Google Gemini and all of these, and even Databricks, right? That's the core foundational layer that many of them are consumer companies, and some of them are selling into enterprises, but which is what very capital intensive, requires oodles of money for GPUs and training to go make that happen, right? Hard for any of us, at least certainly us, to invest, or a new company to start in that, because it requires deep investment combined with tremendous amount of rich ML AI core expertise to go make that happen. One step slightly higher, still within that infrastructure and management layer, is what I call some of the tooling, orchestration, management layer. Some of you might have, who are building products, we use things called a LangChain, for example, or even Scale for labeling. And there are all of these layers that enable us to incorporate many of these foundational models to build products. So we think of this as the agent frameworks, the orchestration layer that can take all of these things to much more rapidly build applications. So we talked about foundational layer, then we talked about the orchestration, tooling, enablement layer, and all that together lets our
Krishna,
companies.
can I ask you to just, as you're giving the framework, like kind of explain how all the people here fit into that framework, because I think it helps us understand yeah, all
No,
of
no,
our
absolutely, absolutely. So far, I was about to do that. So far, the examples I've heard, right, really, in my opinion, Mark and I maybe can debate this. I think will all fit much more into the applications layer of it.
Yeah.
So far, the examples we have heard, right, end up the foundation layer nobody's talked about, which is, of course, we all use as consumers, much more so. Or maybe, as Rocky said, using the LLMs, for example, much more to ingest as an enabler. And maybe Rocky uses some of the tooling, orchestration, management layer, perhaps, if you start to, let's say, want to build some business logic and business flows, you call them agentic workflows and stuff like that today. People use things like a LangChain and N8N are all examples where you can effectively take a business process and you want to string that together into a bunch of things that some of which calls an application, some of which calls a human being, some of which calls an LLM. That stringing together of a maybe it's Joanna's example of how editing workflow might happen. I'm trying to build an editing workflow as a production house, for example. I might now say I have some proprietary logic on what VFX editing might look like, but then I do the VFX editing, then I have to go get signed off by some sort of an editor, for example, where the machine has done that. I have a workflow that I want to string together pretty quickly. I would use some of these tooling orchestration layers to go make that happen. So these are tools, nobody here works on them per se, but people work with them to go build some of these application-oriented stuff that, for example, what Rocky talked about or what Joanna talked about. Before I go to the word of the application layer, maybe, Mark, you want to say something or anybody wants to say something, I'm happy to pause for a second before I go into the application layer here.
Keep going. It's good.
Okay, so the application layer that we talk about, right? For me, the application layer, there are lots and lots and lots of applications. People have built applications today being used 50 years ago, right? And so on to modern applications. So applications could be broadly, what do you mean by applications? Could be vertical applications, let's say, meaning I'm going to use this application in a vertical industry. If Joanna builds an application for the movie industry, or Kim builds an application for supply chain, for example, or not a bad example. An industry-specific one, I would call it as a vertical application. Or I might have a horizontal application, an application that's applicable across a variety of industries. And that could be an HR application. It could be maybe supply chain across many, many industries could be a horizontal application, perhaps, right? So there are horizontal applications and vertical applications. And then there are applications I build within a company for security purposes and so on. I still call them an IT dev security application I might utilize to manage the applications I use here. Now you have all of these types of applications. I call them all AI applications in general. Now these applications could be traditional applications, which means they never used AI, but slowly are beginning to use more and more AI. Like Mimecast is a very long-term company, but I'm sure they were using a little bit of AI, but now right now more and more AI enhancing the products. Now there are applications being created today from ground up, which would not exist if AI would not be there. And these are applications, I call them an AI native application. This is solely possible. We heard the use of the word cursor. Cursor is a magical product people use to write code. Cursor cannot exist if AI does not exist in the first place. So you got a bunch of applications like this that simply exist if and only if AI were to exist. Now, Sierra is a company that used for customer support applications. Sierra would not exist if AI would not exist. RV is in the legal tech space, would not exist if AI would not exist. So AI native applications are ones that are coming together only because AI exists here, is what I'm saying. So that's the continuum between, and then there are AI enabled applications where you got applications which have existed for a long time, but AI is making them better and better and better as more and more functionality can happen here. So we think of
Krishna.
the last thing.
Thank you. I think we're gonna have to stop there. I think we've had an encyclopedic view of AI. Okay,
no,
wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Let me give one last sentence. Hang on, Lisa. The spectrum I would think of is not all applications are AI native. And the
Yeah.
AI enabled, there's a continuum of activity in terms of how much AI can be infused into an application. And we think about that quite a bit. We make an investment in these companies.
Amazing. Thank you. I don't want to cut you off. It's just we've got a lot of speakers and there's a lot of ground that we want to cover here. Very impressive. An
It's
encyclopedic
like
view
the
of
OSI stack for AI that you're describing. It's amazing how history does kind of repeat itself with that stack.
Very much so. From the data layer down up to the applications layer and security layer there.
yeah. All of us from IBM and Accenture and everywhere else can relate to all these all these stacks. So amazing breadth of experience here from the front lines shaping the future of AI. Like, wow. Every one of you touched on something that affects people, affects people's lives, affects people's work. And I'd love to delve into some of these themes. These themes have come up in our chat group, the Wharton OO chat group, about how is this going to affect our kids when they go to find their first job. And kind of starting with that lens, I'm curious who has like one big thing that they're watching in AI that has to do with the next generation, whether it's about education and the implications of AI on that, or whether it's about entry-level jobs and the implication of AI there. Who wants to kick us off on that train of thought?
Lisa, I can start.
Thanks.
So, just there was a recent BCG report that talked about, right, across a bunch of different functions, HR, marketing, engineering, et cetera, like 20 to 40% improvements in productivity from AI, which is wonderful from the CEO seat, but I think from an entry-level job seat, right, and maybe from where a lot of our kiddos who are just graduating college sit is a little bit tough, right? So that is, I think that's a coming reality that a lot of people are already seeing. On the positive side, what I think is interesting to think about is one of the things that workers will have to do in the very near future is not just manage their workflow and their task and then potentially other people, but they're also gonna have to manage bots and data sets, right? And this hybrid of bots, data sets, people, and tasks. And I think one advantage, particularly young people, or AI native folks have coming into the workforce, is the ability to learn work with that hat on. And they may be better, faster, and more impactful than their more experienced peers who are having to learn that skill, after 10 years of work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Digital natives will be able to naturally like experiment with these tools, and that experimentation spirit, that reminds me of Marc, what you were saying, how you introduce AI into your company, and you already started to talk about that with AI in the pocket, but how do you get 2,200 people upskilled on AI really fast so that we can get those productivity gains? I think I'd love to hear your tips.
We have tried not to enforce it. We don't have this burning platform on EBITDA to have to drive down cost at the company. We are in a very good position. I know it's maybe a dangerous thing for a CEO or CFO to think about, but we're in a good position as a company. So we weren't doing it like, oh my God, we got to cut costs and reduce headcount. But we did want to become more agile and fast and creative and innovative. And so we really approached it by department with some of the capability we're rolling out, just finding people that were interested in the topic and talking about how your career chapter at this company should be the chapter of your career where you get these skills that will make you invaluable in the AI economy, right? Because I think a lot of employees fear this stuff, right? They hear, oh, the CEO's rolling out AI in the pocket, AI in the function, we're all screwed, right? And I think our goal has been more, we're in a good position as a company. Let's roll this out to drive innovation, change, and better service. And I think what we underestimate is in a lot of functions, this will lead to more things as opposed to less humans. So I'll give you an example. Krishna was talking about Cursor. I think now you're starting to see people iterate so much more on prototypes and on developing ideas at the product management level. Multiple prototypes, multiple ideas. Before you could, you were lucky if you could draw one prototype up and then get the engineering going. Now there's just more happening there. In support, for example, I keep thinking about, like, actually, I remember when I was at Wharton, I had to go exchange some money, I think, for Dutch guilders at one point, and you had to go into the frickin' bank branch, right? Which is like an experience from hell back in 1999, to go into a bank branch, stand in line, and try and see if they have actual euros or guilders or whatever it was at the time. And I avoid going into the bank at all cost, right? To this day. But now I am interacting with Bank of America multiple times a week online. So I think in customer support, if you take that metaphor, the branch versus the banking app, I think that's like today's in customer support. It's like tickets versus AI interactions. I do want to drive down tickets. I want people to have less tickets where they're saying, "Hey, Mindcast, I have a question about the product. 1-800-Mindcast because I need help." But I actually want the AI to increase this amazing amount of interaction so that people are constantly interacting with us much more than they do through tickets, interacting with us, asking questions of the bots. And that same team will morph in the background to go from ticket handlers to, fulfilling the knowledge needs of those AI corpi and making sure that people really are able to interact with us and get much more out of the product than they would in the old model where they're reading the manual, filing a ticket, and hoping for a call back. So again, I think it's more is going to be happening, more software, more interactions, more coding, more prototyping, more architectural drawings, whatever business you're in, I think you're going to just see more, and that more is going to mitigate the whole idea that we're just going to fire half the world during this AI age.
That's a pretty optimistic view of the job displacement that could be coming. But what is your advice for young people that are, entering college, entering the workforce, like how to dominate the AI age?
Experiment. Be the ones that jump in and know how to use all the tools. I think 3 years ago, or a little under 3 years ago, just to call it back to Wharton, Professor Malik, who probably was not there when we were there, because I think he's significantly probably younger than all of us on this call. But he, just after ChatGPT came out, so just under 3 years ago, he put out, when everyone was up in arms about how AI was being used in school and students weren't going to be writing essays and this is a huge problem, he put out his policies, and his policies were very much like what you would see in a workforce, which makes sense. Doesn't necessarily make sense for policies to have for if your kids are in second grade or fifth grade, because you still want them to learn more of like basic skills of how to do math. You can think about it a little bit like how we had like a similar parallel for us was, as old as it sounds, was calculators, but his policies were around, he expects you to use AI. He expects you to not just take what it says, but to actually modify it and make it your own. And he expects you to trust but verify. So look for additional sources outside. At that time, most chatbots didn't have links that you could check the sourcing, but they now do. So I think if you're in a non-AI endemic company, as coming at it from the point of view of what you should be doing, number one, you should definitely have an AI policy to capture opportunities as well as to mitigate risks. That should be informed by an inventory of what's already happening, and you've got a constant circle back into the policy, and then make sure that your employees all have enterprise services so that none of your private information is being fed back into the public model. And then encourage experimentation, encourage POCs, and then scale those at work. I think we've seen data that like 95% of the initial Gen AI experimentations in companies weren't working, but you find those ones that are, and then keep scaling them, keep iterating. So from the point of view, if you're a young person in the workforce, you can make your way the same way you could have, say, 12 years ago by being like the people that know social media. You wouldn't have had somebody with 40 years of experience on top of you that knows that much more than you. And I've seen many examples. I've gotten calls just in the last couple of weeks from a whole bunch of Hollywood productions where they're all looking for specific AI skill sets. So people who maybe are not in the unions today, are not, didn't necessarily already make it in Hollywood, but have spent the last 3 years learning the skills and are excellent at using AI tools across video, across audio, across image, across text, are getting the opportunity to jump aboard these huge Hollywood productions that they might not have had the opportunity to do so otherwise. And I think you can take that parallel and look at many other industries.
Yeah, experimentation definitely seems like the way to go. Let's stay with you for another moment, Joanna. When we prepped, you shared something that I never thought about before as a possibility with that AI brings to us from the entertainment field. If I understood you correctly, you said that, at some point soon, I could sit down at my couch in the evening and say, "Hey, whomever, I'd like a 30-minute documentary about my great grandmother coming from Russia to the United States on Ellis Island on a boat or something," and that would appear. Like, tell us what you're seeing at the front end of
Sure.
Hollywood about this personalization of content that
Sure.
is
So
new, exciting.
the framework that I looked at it, every time you have a new technology and then looking at how does that going to impact the industry and what's going to hit it out of the park of it is what is new and endemic and something that you could not do with previous technology. So like I can give I know we're short on time, but I can give some really great VR examples or AR examples. Like Pokemon Go would have been one that would not have been possible. That type of game playing would not have been possible before you had mobile geo-targeted, and then that game became a huge hit. They had trouble following it up, but certainly that game was a huge hit. But that was because they were using something that was endemic to that specific technology. And so if you think about what's endemic with AI, yes, it definitely brings down production costs, and that or has the ability to bring down production cost, or to drive much higher production value for lower cost. That's one of the things that's endemic. But another one of the things that is distinct here is the ability to be personalized and customized and do versioning specifically for you. And the branching narrative that used to take so much work for people can be done easily through the models. And so we've seen over the years, if you look at again, pointing to the phone allowed us all to make content easily on our phone. The YouTube allowed us to distribute content easily. And then AI gives us the ability that merging of consumption with creation that we've seen already a bit, that gives us the ability to supercharge the consumption merging with creation. So you can imagine, that a significant chunk of our time that used to be only you have to call it 15 to 20 years ago, almost all of our entertainment time was spent with professionally produce content. Now a good chunk, depending on your age specifically, but anywhere between 40% to 60% of your content time is spent with user-generated content. And so I see a future where there'll be a significant chunk of our time spent with content that we co-direct, or we Lisa was just giving an example that I had given, that you might come home and say, I want to watch a rom-com. I have about 30 minutes before I go to sleep. It's going to star my really good friend Rocky, and whoever, and Reese Witherspoon.
Set in San Antonio.
It's obviously set in San Antonio, so that at the end that Rocky gets his big VC deal with his friend Krishna. So anyway, I said a whole rom-com that will be incredibly entertaining that I want to watch, and it's personalized to me, but then maybe I share it with some friends. So I see some percentage of our entertainment time turning into something that we co-direct. And there's companies that are already doing this, like Showrunner is one that's both getting lots of buzz in Hollywood and also like widely panned, as you can well imagine. But many things that get panned at first do become large over time.
Amazing. I'm gonna get Rocky and Krishna to share, and but everybody else on the line, start thinking about your questions and putting them in the chat room.
There's so many. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I'd love to hear. There's so many ways this conversation could go, right? Like how do we make money in AI, or what happens to us, or what's going to happen to our kids? I think a few of the themes that I'm hearing, or at least high level thoughts, right? One is, on an individual basis, I'm not worried about anyone's kids on this phone, right? I think anybody here as a kid likely has a smart parent, talented, and AI creates a huge opportunity and dislocation to do the things that Joanna's talking about, where you can augment or rethink your career path. So individually, I think everybody has a chance to do whatever they've wanted to. As a cohort, I'm very concerned, right? I think as a cohort, and I'm already seeing cracks in the workforce, right? The more people I have coming and willing to work for me for free, right? College educated, talented, right? Great parents, and their parents are saying, look, I will pay for 6 months of free labor because my kid can't get a job and they graduated a year ago or 18 months ago. And I'm already seeing cracks as a cohort in the workforce. It makes me think of where Joanna used to work, which is the singularity, right? And if you go back and read one of the Bibles of Silicon Valley and you think about the singularity, saying, well, the whole thesis of what's going to happen is, computers eventually reach AGI and they're smarter than people. And then the answer is we're all going to get universal basic income and create art, right? Create the show that Joanna's talking about. Like, I tend to think about in the next 5 or 10 years, is that really what's happening, right? Or all these jobs are going to go away from the white collar workforce? And look, my own advice to young people is keep your cash burn as low as possible, right? Keep yourself free of debt and keep your cash burn as low as possible. And then you get lots of opportunities over the course of a 10 or 15-year cycle, like we went through, right? We suffered through 2 financial crises, right? At least, I think. And many of us kind of suffered really harshly. And now those folks are, flying private. So I think there's over a 20-year cycle, you got a lot of opportunity, but you got to economics right. Sorry, I'm just spewing a lot of just random kind of the thing around the workforce and what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think that's
Well, I mean, Rocky makes a good point that I mean, there's a lot of
Lisa,
background
you should
again.
be able to
But
mute
I think that
people that are.
Okay,
I think there. I mean, there's
please
a
mute
societal
yourself if you can hear us.
there's a societal implication that may or may not specifically impact those on this phone that were lucky enough to have graduated from Wharton 100 years ago, like we did. And so I think there's so much opportunity. The opportunity stems from the ability for sort of people to find and create new companies, to find and create new creative expressions of themselves, and to do it at a much higher quality than they used to. I think the risks that I see, there's the jobs impact, particularly at a time for those of us who are in the US, that our social structure is being torn away. And so, Rocky talked about UBI. I think that we're seeing even less what's the word, like political climate of thinking something like UBI would be possible, while even the existing health care and many of our other lunches, like so those basic things are getting torn away. Choose the environmental impact, which hasn't been figured out. I think, I know that the Web3 people figured it out, so I have faith that the AI people will be able to figure out the environmental impact, but it hasn't yet been figured out. The wealth stratification is something that is a concern to me, because again, as well, it may or may not particularly affect this cohort. It does affect the overall society, but I see the wealth stratification being have increased very much since, if you go back 4 or 5 decades. But I believe that this technology has potential to only further that. And then there's a whole, what we talk about here a lot is the copyright and creative ownership. So anyone who owns IP, there's a lot of question around what that's going to look like, and laws. All the legal is still TBD.
Yeah. Krishna, there's a question here that goes one step deeper.
I saw that too.
Okay.
So actually, it was exactly what I was going to say to add to this question here. So the way I advise my kids, there is areas of optimism and there is a cohorted areas of skepticism, as Rocky articulated well. The area of optimism is that if you have any domain knowledge, that's the key, right? Understand an industry wherever you are. It lets you be a tech entrepreneur pretty much more efficiently. Somebody with any insight into what something can take Lovable Cursor and launch an application without the scariness of what does it really mean to go launch an application to test an idea. So product domain knowledge simply rocks here, right? So being early product management to domain knowledge. Similarly, domain knowledge also means you can be a solopreneur much more effectively. You can manage and own a lawn mowing business, a yard cutting business, a pool management business much more effectively, because there are amazing tools available to go do these things. So anybody can be a solopreneur much more effectively. And any of us with any level of domain knowledge in any industry can be much more effectively be a tech entrepreneur, because tech permeates everything here. So that's the optimism here, relevant for early career people who try to get any industry knowledge and then be solopreneurs, or any of us on this who now want to be a late stage entrepreneur here. The scary part, of course, is that there are a lot of reports that are coming out about white collar people are actually not quitting jobs anymore because they're worried about getting jobs elsewhere. But the tradespeople are quitting their jobs much more so because those tradespeople can get lots and lots of jobs all over the place. They've got real confidence. So we've got education technology companies in the portfolio, which are guiding early career kids, not necessarily kids of people in this panel, towards moving them towards vocational and skills-based training, where there's a tremendous deficit. There is a tremendous ROI available for going and doing a 3-year trade school and doing something along those lines. And there is a massive opportunity coming together for people like that in the next decade or so. So that would be the more societal perspective on how people should prepare, at least in my opinion, on the AI dislocation underway in the market.
Any other views?
I like that we think our
I
kids
think
are
you're
thinking
saying
largely.
that it's about learning the hard skill, like knowing how to do something practical, like fix a car or, be a plumber. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Does anybody have a different point of view? And also the speed to entrepreneurship, that's a great point, Krishna, actually, and that does pertain to all of us here and potentially our kids. I think it's a time saver.
Back to speed to all forms of entrepreneurship, not just to be a tech entrepreneur, right? Even tech entrepreneur is faster because you can get cycles of learning going to build an app and launch an app much more quickly, but you can just be more effective in running all kinds of businesses with 1 or 2 people, as opposed to having a staff for everything to go to do things and so on.
Joanna, you want to add something?
Well, I was +1 to what Krishna said. I mean, I think we've seen this over time that, like when we would have graduated, pre-cloud, starting a tech company required a lot more capital. And then as AWS came online, like there just have been continued technology trends that make it easier. So now you could have a really, I mean, I think impactful company with very, very few people. So that also provides, because of all the tools that exist, that also provides the opportunity for many more people to have a small 4 or 5 person company that has significant revenue. Somebody had asked in the chat, and I said it earlier, but just to reiterate, what should people be learning? People should be learning the tools. It's to me, it's just especially those of us who are our age and those of us who are very young. If you go and do a search for AI, in, I don't know, LinkedIn, and in the job sector, there's lots and lots of jobs for people who know how to use the tools. And but particularly for people keep asking about their kids and what you'd be doing if you're young, the way that 10 to 20 years ago, it's being seen as digitally native was help to get a social media job or a digital job. The same is true here. So have your, I think it's about like becoming an expert, not just in ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, but also the tools across I put a whole bunch of them in there: VO and Runway and Luma and 11 Labs, and those are mostly creation tools, but there's lots of other tools as well. But I would just recommend if you're trying to tell their kids where to spend their time, spend time creating using those tools and become an expert, and it will be not hard to find employment.
In terms of the tools themselves, like Marc mentioned this U.com, which gives you access to all the tools. And like I've noticed that Claude is better to edit my whatever I'm writing. But what are some other tools that we should know about, that people on this call should know about and should be using, that are great time savers?
I don't have anything to recommend there, but the one thing I am doing is not signing any multi-year contracts for any AI tools because it's changing so much, right? So I'm doing all 1-year agreements with these providers, and honestly, they're gonna not like laundry or whatever, but they're gonna cycle quite a bit and settle. So I think like I mentioned U.com just as an example. I'm not even hopefully they're not listening, but like. Who knows, right? Who knows? Krishna's mentioned Cursor. Cursor is magical, as you called it, but in a year, it may not be. It may be something else that is much better.
Yeah.
So
I'm an advisor and
very current. I think
there are a number of these aggregators that give you access to many tools. Our classmate Andres has one of them called animatics.ai. I'm an advisor to him. But you're able to, and so what it prevents there, particularly if you're looking at it from an enterprise side, that it may take the company 3 months to sign an enterprise contract. And by the time they sign the enterprise contract, some other tool has leapfrogged and is much better now. And so these aggregators where you can access any of the tools through them prevents that. And so you have access to all the latest of the greatest tools. And then if you're using it from an enterprise level, if you don't want your employees using a certain tool like Clean or Minimax, either because there's a lawsuit against them or because they originate in a country that your company has decided they don't want to do business with, then you can also block those tools.
I would just add
So
one comment. Since I'm the cybersecurity guy, I also just caution people. Like I know folks at senior levels who use, I won't name which of the tools, but like one of the most famous LLMs out there. And there's an assumption that these have been built by enterprise security folks who know that they're never supposed to read your data. They're never going to look at anything. But the reality is, I know for a fact it's one of the top 5 global accounting firms that's rolling back/delaying the rollout of one of the latest LLMs, because what they found is these things were built by PhDs who don't take security rules the same way, and they're going in and actually reading your messages, looking at things, trying to understand how to train the models. And so what you think you're getting with the terms of service when you're signing up for these tools, and you're assuming that they're not going to use your data, we exercise a lot of caution here about what we use, just from the fact that we don't trust a lot of these folks to continue to protect our data the way that we would normally expect a large enterprise.
Yeah,
because they're not,
Rocky, and
DNA.
one of our products actually detects which employees are using which AI, and the use of shadow AI is through the roof. Right after DeepSeek came out, one of the biggest consultancies in the world, their employees were just uploading stuff into DeepSeek, and who knows where that goes. So
Right.
yeah.
with the shadow AI, what does that mean?
It just means like shadow IT was when people started adopting SaaS applications behind the CIO's back. So you started using just stuff, right? They even swipe a personal credit card, but put corporate data in there. Now they're doing that with AI. They're saying like, I'm not going to wait for the CIO to give me access to a tool. I'm just going to start using it. Oh, I hear DeepSeek's cool. I'm going to try that tomorrow and throw all my client data into DeepSeek and make my next presentation.
Yeah, okay, scary. All right, let's do a lightning round, and I'm going to call on Kim first. And kind of building on where this conversation is going now, it's like one trend in AI that you're watching that you're really excited about, and one trend that you think maybe we should be cautious about, the people on the call. And yeah.
Let's see. Trend I'm excited about is how much of the mundane HR work can be automated, right? Maybe like the banking example, right? I think inside a company, HR tasks are usually kind of all of our last favorites. Things I'm concerned about. I'm just concerned about the speed of the organizational structure and shift, and all of our ability as leaders and as humans to adapt to that.
Marc, what do you have on the two shoulders?
I'm pretty excited about the usage in the product, right? AI in the product. I think there's some profound new things you can do that I won't go into detail on given time, but yeah. And then I think the worry is, I think the mid-career professional, I think maybe Joanna or somebody else mentioned it. I think if you're starting your career, you're going to figure it out. If you're ending your career, you'll be fine as well. I think it's a mid-career person that did coding a certain way for 10, 20 years, and now all of a sudden has to adopt these tools or customer support. That's, I think, the area where they're gonna need help. So.
And they're going to need help to be more agile, or what's the fear there in the mid?
Modernize their skill set. Yeah, to modernize their skill set. I think if you're young, you don't have a pattern that you're used to, and if you're end of career, you're end of career, so it's all good. You ride it out. But if you're mid-career, you have to basically relearn how to do your job in some functions, and getting them excited to do that is key.
To me, the end of the career point is that you have pattern recognition and you have all this expertise and all this domain expertise, and these tools help you, like they help you do faster synthesis, or the tools can be used to accelerate your speed to do what you're already doing. But if you don't have the skills of synthesis or pattern recognition built up, like the tools might sort of prevent you from gaining those higher level skills. I think that's how I see it. Joanna, what would you say, like something you're really excited about and something that keeps you up at night if AI does that? It may or may
I've
not.
mentioned, I've mentioned a lot of those already. I certainly am excited about the prospect of putting all these creative tools in people's hands all around the world, like those who haven't had the ability but have a story inside, and or you know something that they've always wanted to create, but they didn't have the time or the money or the resources to be able to do it. So that is what excites me the most, I would say. In terms of I mean, I've talked about a lot of the risks. One of the, I think that what's relevant here, and you know, I sat on the Metaphysic AI board, which was purchased by DNEG, and I've advised a number of C-suites and boards on these tools. And I think what concerns me there is just like a little bit of lack of depth and deep understanding I've seen in those rooms. And happy to chat with anyone who wants to go deeper on that, because I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of really understanding how to both drive as much opportunity as you can from these tools, as well as how to mitigate the risks.
Interesting. And that's a good point about the boards. That's a whole other topic. Maybe we'll come back to that in a moment. Rocky, what are your
I'm excited. I'm excited by two things, and probably worried about two things. I'm just broadly excited by the unlock that I think is going to happen with AI across many industries and in ways that we are still just scratching the surface. And I think I've got a broad optimism about how great the technology can be. I'm specifically also excited about how it augments lots of people. So not everybody went to Wharton, not everybody is, kind of has the same skill set. And I think lots of folks who may have been disadvantaged, right, in certain ways, I think now, and I'll pick my nephew as one, I think he's got, ways that AI will equalize him in this world that before AI, he was, maybe not get the job at Goldman Sachs, but now he could probably get any job he wants with an AI kind of in his pocket, like Mark says. So I think there's lots of augmentation that happens for lots of people who may not have had all the same opportunities. I'm worried about two things. One, I think has the potential to stunt growth for a lot of people who should still be really good at human relationships, who suddenly are now interacting with AI chatbots more than ever. And it takes kind of this digital isolation and potentially makes it even more harder for them to really understand how to interact with humans. And I think humanity is still what separates us from AI, and where our compelling advantages. And then I'm also specifically worried about the fact that the LLMs are different by geography and by area, right? So I think what the Chinese LLMs are telling their people is different than what the American LLMs are telling them with the Europeans. And I think there's a real risk that has in society where the LLMs are kind of, are being biased. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I think they're all being biased in their own ways, but what they're presenting as facts or kind of the ways of the world and the knowledge base, I think there's kind of an arms race going on that I'm probably not even understanding. But I think that there's, governments are playing with our AI, our LLM models, that's going to impact broader society over time, potentially.
Yeah, that's an absolutely fascinating point. Like we've long talked about these echo chambers that we're all living in that have led to the polarization in our society, at least in the United States specifically. But this is taking that echo chamber to a whole other level, because it's not just like what we're reading in the media. It's like it's permeating our work in many levels. So that's a pretty profound point for sure. Krishna, what would you add?
Yeah, so let me try to be additive to all the wonderful points here. And let me start on the negative note and then come to the positive note so that I don't finish on a negative note. The negative thing I really worry about, actually, given where I sit, is the bubble that's underway. As much as it is, we have talked about the amazing disruptive things, but investors in general are paying enormously for futures. There are a lot of elements of it. Feels like 2000 when we started the venture business here. NVIDIA invests in OpenAI. OpenAI buys NVIDIA chips, and so both are up. And there are many, many examples of early stage companies in AI getting value for $1 billion because they bought, helping. A helps B, B helps C, C helps A, and that circular economy is underway quite a bit in that broad echo chamber here. So given how much NASDAQ has been dependent on the big 7 stocks here and how many public pensions and globally are invested in these things, I'm very concerned about the valuation bubble, undoubtedly here. That's number one. So there has to be a correction, undoubtedly, and the ramifications of that and how significant of that is TBD. The NASDAQ correction, obviously, we all felt it deeply because when we left school. So there will be a correction that's coming in that context. On the positive side, however, and the same advice to go up and give the advice to kids coming out of college, I think there are still sustainable things going to happen for a long time. It will unleash another golden age of entrepreneurship. So what I would tell people, not only what they study and what tools they pick up, is to start to have a different mindset, a mindset associated with venturing forward, a mindset associated with entrepreneurship, because it's much easier to be an entrepreneur with less of a support cast around you. You can go be a great entrepreneur there. So I would tell kids, early career people, to start to have the mindset associated with venturing forward, to be solopreneurs, to get things going, because you can be a services company and have software-like gross margins if you can really, really creatively use AI here and get valued beautifully by venture capitalists. So that on that note, there's a lot of enthusiasm for how many industries could be more attractive industries to invest in, and many people who are not necessarily tech folks can become legitimate entrepreneurs in their own right in the years to come.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to stick to our time, and I'm going to start with the thank yous here. And the first thank you goes to Krishna's daughter, who came in out of nowhere and created the beautiful social tile that that we've used to publicize this event. So she is clearly, a digital native and amazing woman. So please thank her for us when she gets home from school today. I want to thank all of the speakers who invested a lot of time in kind of preparing for this and showing up and sharing your expertise and your points of view. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Kim. Amazing to share here. And I want to also thank Manisha, who is my partner in all things Spark Speaker Series. We're really intrigued that one of the outcomes of our recent reunion was that people wanted to connect more and stay connected and to learn together. So that's the purpose of this Spark series. So, let us know other topics that you want to have and other topics that you want to speak on. And thanks for joining to everyone in the audience. We have critical mass, so